Good morning, Year 4, and welcome to your reading lesson on Wednesday, the 24th of February, where we are doing retrieval questions again, but based on the next two chapters of Varjak 4, chapters 14 and 15. So we will be successful in exactly the same way as we were yesterday by being able to know what the question is asking us, being able to underline or identify the key information in the question, and use different methods to find the answers, including scanning through the text and looking for that key information. Okay? So for your starter, which of these is a retrieval question? So I've put down the acronym here. So VIPERS, remember vocabulary, inference, prediction, explanation, retrieval, and summarize. So which of these questions is a retrieval one? Is it circle the main idea of a paragraph? Why did the village flood? Or what day did the village flood? So write down which one you think is the retrieval question. For a challenge, can you write the paragraph that these questions could be based on? Okay, pause the video and select which bit you're going to do. Okay, if you did the challenge, hopefully you wrote a paragraph about a flood in a village, because that's what it was about, with a little bit more detail than that, obviously. And the retrieval question was, what day did the village flood? Okay, this one, why did the village flood? It may have told you, but I went for an inference one, okay, depending on how you write the paragraph, of course. So you might not have known, you might have put that one. This was the obvious one. Circle the main idea of the paragraph could be classed as summarizing. Okay, so this was the very obvious one, although you could argue these two could be. So again, making sure we know what retrieval is, we must take the answers directly from the text. They're there, they're staring at us in the face. We just pick them up from the text. Okay, we don't need to change the wording or anything. And that's what we went through yesterday, making sure we answer again directly. Okay. Can you remember any of the skills we looked at? The question stems. Okay, so who, what, where, when. List 2 or 3 things, and I don't need to read them out again. I'm sure you're getting used to them by now, which is fantastic. We did tick the correct answer yesterday. We did true or false. Can you remember any of the other ones we did? That's right, we said look at the paragraph beginning, and we said find and copy. So perhaps we should add those into our list. Find and copy a word. And we said look at the paragraph, because that just helps you find where the information is in the text, because sometimes it's quite hard to look at a long text and be able to find what we need. So if we can direct it to a certain part of the text, it helps us. Okay, well, I'm really excited to read the next part of the book because I'm really getting into it, and I hope you are too. So let's settle down and read chapter 14 of our Varjak report. Down in the darkness, Varjak dreamed. He was walking by the river in Mesopotamia. Date palms swayed in the warm breeze. The night air smelled of cinnamon. Jalal walked beside him. Jalal, I thought I'd never see you again. Why cinnamon? Said Jalal, as if he hadn't heard. Cinnamon? Perhaps you have noticed the smell all around us. Now follow me and be silent. Jalal led him down the riverbank towards a group of men. They were sitting around a campfire, cooking food in a sizzling pan. The most wonderful smell in the world came out of that pan. It was toasty warm and cinnamony, and it drove Varjak wild. His nostrils twitched. His mouth drooled. He was starving. Oh, let's pop a full stop at the end of that sentence. There we go. A couple of fat, sluggish cats circled the fire. So circled, remember, meaning to walk around in a circle. One of the men tossed them something from the pan. Varjak beamed at Jalal. Obviously, they were going to join them. He was going to get some of that delicious smelling food. Jalal shook his head. These are not true cats. They have forgotten how to hunt. They are scavengers, trapped here by their own greed. They have become slaves to the people. They might as well be dead already. Varjak blushed with shame, remembering that scrap of rancid meat he'd wanted so badly in the city. But what if you're hungry and there's nothing else, he said. Jalal's eyes blazed amber like the rising sun. A cat is an idea of freedom made flesh, he said fiercely. It cannot be tied down. To be truly alive, it must be free, and a free cat hunts. It never scavenges or depends on the kindness of people. It depends only on itself. Varjak looked down at the ground. He wished it would swallow him up. I failed, Jalal. I failed you. I failed everyone. It's no failure to make a mistake, my son. What matters is whether you can learn from it. Varjak looked up. The old cat was smiling at him. It was like a ray of sunlight in the night. I want to learn how to hunt, Jalal. Then learn you shall. I will restore the knowledge that has been lost. I will teach you hunting, for it is the third skill. Now show me your awareness. Track down that chirping noise you heard when last you were here. So if you remember, awareness was the second skill. Varjak pricked up his ears, determined not to fail again. The noise came from the riverbank. With his sensitive whiskers, he probed the air currents that carried the sound until he pinned down its source precisely. Crickets, he said, 4 hidden behind that clump of reeds. Correct. Jalal glided towards the reeds. Varjak marvelled at the way he moved. He was stealth itself. When you stalk your prey, whispered Jalal, you become your prey. You make it a part of yourself. Breathe like it breathes. Think like it thinks. When you and the prey are one, you will know its every movement, and then you will move first. This is the secret of the third skill, and why it is done best alone. Try it. The crickets chirped on behind the long reeds as Varjak and Jalal crept up to them. Varjak selected his target. He sat stock still, waiting, watching, letting all his awareness flow into the cricket. Every time it shifted, his senses went with it, tracking its speed, trajectory, vectors. He took it all in, as if there was nothing else in the world, as if even he didn't exist anymore. The crickets stirred. They sensed they were being watched. They were about to move. Varjak knew it with absolute certainty. His legs tensed like steel springs, tight, tight, until the right moment came. He uncoiled into the air. Claws slid out smoothly, pinning the prey, forcing it down to the ground. He opened his jaws, prepared to sink his teeth. Enough! Enough! Jalal was shouting. Varjak released the stunned cricket. What had he done wrong now? Jalal took a deep breath. It was a splendid attack. You have the third skill, but this is only practice. You were going to kill it. It's just a cricket. And we are just cats. Remember, you may cause harm only where there is no alternative, only when your life is at stake. You take enough and no more. That is the way the world is made. I'm sorry, Jalal, said Varjak, tail between his legs. I didn't know. And why did you set off for one cricket? It wouldn't feed a mouse. No one could catch more than one at a time. Oh no? Jalal grinned. Varjak looked down at his ancestor's paws. The other 3 crickets were right there, wriggling on the ground. Now pay attention, said Jalal. This is how it is done. Chapter 15. A tongue the texture of gravel licked Varjak's face, calling him up from the dream. It scraped a tender spot on his cheek. Blinding colours burst out in his head. He opened his eyes a crack. A black and white blur swam into view. Hold still, commanded a gravelly voice. I know it hurts, but it has to be done. Farjak closed his eyes and thought of Mesopotamia, of Jalal, of that delicious cinnamon food he hadn't eaten. Anything, even hunger, was better than this pain. There, she said at last. You'll never win a cat show, but you'll live. You'd better live. Farjak opened his eyes again. Holly stood above him, Tam behind her. They were in a narrow, cobbled alleyway, a quiet path along the backs of city buildings. Iron fire escapes led up to sooty windows far above. Drain pipes snaked down through grilles in the ground to sewers below. Farjak thought he could see something glimmering, moving about beneath the streets, but it was night in the alley and he couldn't be sure. In the distance, he could hear those fearsome metal monsters roaring along the roads. And do you remember from your questions yesterday that the metal monsters were the description for the dogs? He could taste their poison smoke in the air. He could hear, too, the hisses and growls of street cats as they went about their business. But in this alley, the three of them were alone. There was no sign of the ginger Tom who had nearly killed him. Are you pleased that the friends have come back? I hope so. He stretched out. Cold, wet cobblestones dug into his ribs. His body was a pulp of pain. Yet, strangely, he didn't feel too bad inside. He was glad he was still alive, glad this cat with the gravelly voice had rescued him. You all right, Farjak? Said Holly. You've been out for ages. I thought you didn't want friends, he said. We're not friends, she snapped. Tam just made me feel bad about leaving you. Me? Laughed Tam. As if I could make her do anything. Anyway, Ginger's gang went too far, said Holly. Farjak stood up unsteadily. You stopped them, didn't you? I think you saved my life. All right, Holly sounded embarrassed. She wouldn't look him in the eye. With one leap, she pounced onto a brick ledge high on the wall and started to stalk away, spiky as ever. Farjak wasn't about to lose her again. Without a second thought, he went after her. One moment he was down on the cobbles, the next he was on the ledge. His body seemed to know what to do. He only had to follow Holly. Tam came behind him. He padded between them to the edge of the wall, where Holly stopped to look up at the sky. Farjak followed her gaze. A white wedge of moon glimmered there. It had grown since he last saw it. It was changing, becoming bigger and brighter. Farjak looked down from the sky. Where are we exactly? We're in the centre of the city, said Holly. No one else knows about these alleys. You're safe here. Safe from what? From the gang, stupid. On this side of the park, only the centre is neutral ground. Ginger's gang runs the east. Sally Bones is boss of the west. Whatever you do, don't try and fight her like you did with Ginger. I don't think anyone could help if you did that. Ginger's rough, but deep down he's still one of us. Sally Bones, she's something else. Shh, hissed Tam. She'll hear you. Don't be stupid, said Holly. She's everywhere, whispered Tam. No one's everywhere. It doesn't make sense. Then how else do you explain it, said Tam. You said it yourself. She's not one of us. She's something else. Farjak wondered what she meant. Not one of us? That was what his own family used to tell him. What's so bad about that, he said. Tam's eyes widened as she spoke. She's all white. Holly snorted. Big deal, you're all brown. So what? She can do things no cat can do, said Tam darkly. What sort of things, said Farjak. Tam shuddered. It's dangerous to even think about it. Holly rolled her eyes. Farjak smiled. Tam was always so dramatic. Just checking I've read all of that. Yeah. Okay. I won't tell anyone, he promised. I can keep a secret. Well, Tam glanced around nervously. All right, one thing. She can become invisible. She'll just appear out of thin air, and you don't see her coming till it's too late. That's why no one can beat her in a fight. That's just tales, said Holly, and I don't believe them. But she's the toughest cat in the city, no question. Even Ginger fears Sally Bones. Please, begged Tam, don't say her name. Her gang's cornering all the food too, continued Holly, which is why we need to keep these places secret. She jumped down from the wall. Varjak and Tam followed her. They shimmied under a low iron railing into another alley. It would have kept him out if he hadn't seen Holly sneak through first. They're moving in on Ginger's turf now. That's why he was so rough when you went for his bins, she said. Which reminds me, said Tam. What are we eating? I'm hungry. Me too, said Varjak. Holly shrugged. There's nothing here. I've checked already. We could search the park, or we could go hunting. Hunting means splitting up and going it alone, said Tam. I want to do something altogether. She looked down. Besides, hunting's difficult, she muttered. It's not so hard, said Varjak. You, said Holly, squaring up to him, you know how to hunt. He wasn't sure. He felt like he did, but he'd only ever hunted in a dream. I think so. I've copied that twice. I think so. Holly laughed. You either can or you can't, and I've never met a pet who could. She stared at Tam. Plenty of street cats can't. Just because you know a lot, said Tam, doesn't mean you're great. I'd rather everyone love me than be some boring know-it-all. But I do love you, Tam, grinned Holly. Her mustard eyes sparkled with mischief. You do? Said Tam suspiciously. Of course I do. Holly sounded very sincere. Tam relaxed and smiled. Everyone does, continued Holly. Tam's smile grew wider. And you know who loves you most of all? Who? Said Tam. Who, Holly? Tell me who. Sally Bones, shouted Holly. Tam leapt back, startled. Holly laughed at the shocked expression on her face. Varjak chuckled. Behind her mustard eyes, Holly had a sense of humour. But poor Tam hadn't seen it coming, and her shaggy brown coat was standing on end. That's not very funny, said Tam as her fur slowly settled. Come on, smiled Holly. Let's see what we can find in the park. Okay. So find and copy a word that means a feeling of sudden shock. Okay, so let's look back on this last page and see if we can find a word that means a feeling of sudden shock. So our key information in this sentence is the sudden shock bit. So what words do we know that are similar to shock? Let's use our scanning and have a look. Shock, shock, shock. I've seen the word shock here, so it can't be that because it has to be a different word. So what other word? I don't think I've scanned properly. So what other word can mean shocked? Aha, startled. That's a word that means shocked. So that is what I will write as my answer. So in startled. Okay, so again, must spell it right. Startled. So today again, we're doing some retrieval questions. We're going to have some questions that say look at the paragraph beginning or tick the correct answer. Lots of different questions, and you will find them on your Teams. So go to Teams and answer retrieval questions about the chapters we've just read, chapters 14 and 15, and then there'll be a chance for you to make up some of your own questions again as well. Okay, good luck, and we will meet again for a comprehension tomorrow. Bye-bye.